Adam Smith. So Adam Smith talked about the promotion of the self-interest. And then DNA. So what did we learn about DNA? Is it predetermined, DNA? Can it change?
We know now that
it can. But when it first got discovered, what we thought was that it was predetermined, and we came into the world with genetic coding, and we can't actually change that genetic coding. And then we had the second industrial revolution, and the rise of the nuclear family. And so, and through transportation, those people moved away from cities and living together out into the suburbs, and we created now nuclear families that aren't in large part surrounded by the community that they used to have. So we have these families that are trying to operate by themselves and in a nuclear fashion, when we're really evolutionarily we're used to living in community and relying on community support. Capitalism and mass production. So I don't think any of these things are bad. I mean, we look at what it's done for our world. It's done a lot of things. But what I think has happened is the pendulum has swung a little too far. What we need to do is come back and take some of those things that were great about the way that we were in the beginning, our connection or in our connectivity, our natural state of wholeness, and bring some of those back and regain some of those aspects in the way that we're living and the way that we're working. When you look at quantum physics, which is really an epigenetics, which is the study of cells, you start to see that some of the concepts that we've been living by are actually being tested. So when you look at quantum physics, it says that all the parts are interconnected, that they're all moving together. It's not a linear process that's going on. Everything is operating within this web, and they're interchanging and changing places all the time. Quantum physics also says that once you're in contact with one being or one cell, you always that when that molecule or cell or the atom moves away from the atom, those two atoms actually change at the same time. And so they're saying that there's no time that's traveling between the two of them, and that there's this, we were talking about before, there's this space that in between the two atoms where most of the dynamic is occurring. And that there's this, a constant transfer of information. We're also now learning that our environment actually affects our gene expression. So I just want to read to you from this book, if I can see this. It's hard getting old. Oh. Little discovered what prompts the turn of the switch is an environmental signal. From the air, water, and food we consume, the toxins we're exposed to, or even the people we surround ourselves with. This in turn affects the methylation of the DNA double helix, which is exclusively sensitive to the environment, particularly in the early stages of life. Epigenetic changes in the ultimate expression or silencing the gene occur as a result of environmental stressors. Diet, the quality of air and water, the emotional climate within your family or business, the state of your relationships, your sense of fulfillment in life, the sum total of how you live your life, and also how your ancestors lived theirs, have the most effect on the expression of your genes. Every factor in our lives conspires to create a physical person we become. So if that's true, I mean, there's some people here in human development and executive development. If that's true, what are the implications on the workplace?
Enormous. Spend most of our time.
If our environment affects our gene expression, right, and we want like the good genes, the smart genes to be coming out in people, the genes that are in fact impacting, having a positive impact on business, that can be significant. If we can really figure out what factors in our environment, what factors in relationships, what factors and what motivates people are turning on different genes within a person to actually get them to perform at their highest level, that's really, and that we have some type of impact or effect on that is really profound. And what we could be doing in human development with all human development, in particular within the workplace. Any questions? What does this mean for us? So I see we've kind of led up to that there's a way that we're working, which I see and I've experienced, is having a lot of separation, alienation, sort of I versus you, domination, selfishness. And I see that we have an opportunity to move towards workplaces that have more connection, belonging, wholeness, cooperation, and competition. So we're balancing all of those out. And I think that, we talked about before that we've been going at this for a long time, and things are not changing. I mean, they're changing sort of slowly in some areas, but overall, people are not more engaged. Overall, people are not happier at work. And overall, things haven't changed. And I think that we need to come up with a whole new approach about how we do this. And the model that I've developed is there's 3 aspects to it, and it's whole human, whole organization, whole environment. One of the things I really want you to hear is that all of these things have to operate together. And this is the main reason I think that organizations are failing to get this right, because they're doing one piece of it or one aspect of it. You've got to get all of these things going together at the same time. So the whole human, I see when I say the whole human, this is me. So how do we access the best of the individual human being? The whole organization is then the dynamic between the people in the organization. And the whole environment is when you take those people and you put them into somewhere, that's the environment, right? So you put them into a workplace. You take animals and put them out into the environment. So that's what I mean by environment. So in the workplace, we have some people here in human development. What part of the brain do we most develop in organizations? The left. Where do innovation, creativity, empathy, and emotional feelings come from? Which part of the brain?
We're saying more the right brain.
It's more the right brain. It's actually the right brain, but it's the 2 sides of the brains working together. It's the whole brain. When you look at somebody who's creating or innovating, there are synapses that go between the 2 sides of the brain. Those 2 synapses are lighting up. And not to be, I know I'm going to remember all old men here, but when they look at the difference between men and women, guess what? The women have more synapses between the 2 sides of the brain, and they're going at a faster rate. Okay, so when women are doing something or solving a problem, generally speaking, we tend to use more of a whole brain than men. But in most part, we live in a culture, in a world where the left brain is valued more, and where we're using that more in the workplace. We also, I think that in most organizations, again, there's some that are starting to catch on to this, we really just are developing one side of the brain. So I say, gosh, if we're only really accessing and developing one side of the brain, we're not developing the other side of the brain, nor are we actually looking at the connections between the mind and the body, I'm not really sure that we're accessing all of what a human being has to bring into an organization. So that's what I mean by a whole human approach to development. We need to put the brain back together and put the brain back on the body and create approaches that actually approach the development of a human being that way instead of just one part of the brain. This is really creating programs that actually look at everything that's impacting a human being's ability to be most effective. So this is how our thoughts affect our moods, how they affect our health of our body, how food impacts our body. How many people believe now that nutrition actually, or eating good foods actually helps you feel better? Most people, right? How many people now believe that food actually can impact the way that we process information? Right. How many organizations have nutrition as part of their leadership development courses? None. Isn't that amazing to you? So this is basic. You just look at that and you say, wow, we now know that food and nutrition actually impact our energy level at work. They impact our ability to solve problems. They impact our ability for our brain to process information. Food impacts our ability to be creative and innovative. But we're not even, introducing that into any of our training or leadership programs.
There are a lot of companies that are introducing wellness programs.
They introduce wellness programs, but it's separate. Why isn't it integrated into how we develop our people? Why isn't it required that you understand nutrition and how it impacts your body and how your wellness as a leader? Why, if you're the CEO of a company or the head of human resources or the COO, why are you not required to learn about nutrition if we know now that this impacts our employees' ability to be productive and to be their best self? I don't get it. Yes?
My sister's an administrator, and they started this new model they're using her school, and it integrates everything from yoga to meditation, from the administrators to the teachers to the students.
Uh-huh.
And it's this whole new model that once they get all the research is through Yale, once they get all the research and all the data, it's gonna either, prove to, let's put it in the systems, throughout Connecticut or wherever they're looking to put it at it. But it's really interesting. So her kids, they meditate, it's food, it's everything. And so it's already, and that's right around here. I mean,
Right, it's definitely starting to happen, but I haven't seen it yet. I mean, there are some companies that are introducing it now into being mandatory, but 95% of companies still don't think about developing people in that way. So I think that we need to bring in, this is just one model, it's really a holistic way of looking at health and all the different things, to your point, of what are involved with health. You know, meditation or mindfulness is the key word that you're hearing now. Exercise and diet, nutrition, how do we clean our body so that it's most effective? I just think that we need to start bringing models like that of holistic living and holistic thinking into the workplace. When we look at brainwave patterns, where do we spend most of our time in the workplace?
The top.
In beta. And look at what's going on in beta. Okay? Where do when you look at this, where would you think that our best thinking and innovative thinking and creativity and being able to solve problems, being able to collaborate, where do you think that takes place?
Alpha.
Mostly?
Alpha.
Yeah, it's alpha and theta, right? So I stop and I say, these are all the things that we're trying to get people to do. Again, why are we not creating more environments where people are operating within or be able to access these brainwave patterns instead of always being in beta? And there are lots of ways to do that. We don't have time to get into it today, but there are lots of methodologies now that actually bring us into those brainwave patterns, but most companies aren't using those methodologies yet. You know who's doing a lot of that stuff is Google, actually. So these are just, when I talk about the whole human, here are just some ideas. There are lots of ideas that we can bring into organizations. So ensuring leadership programs have a mind-body element. We just talked about that a little bit. Providing education on the interconnectivity of mind and body. I believe that we can't expect people to have ideal relationships with people unless we really understand our impact on others and understand our behaviors impact on others. We have to understand this concept of interconnectivity. And if we don't even understand the concept of interconnectivity within our own body, we're not going to understand the concept of interconnectivity beyond us. So I think we need to start teaching those concepts of interconnectivity. Creating a holistic wellness model, using proven mind-body techniques which access different brainwave patterns, and combining the mind-body development into one role. So you mentioned the wellness role. In most organizations, there's a person who runs wellness, and then there's a person who runs leadership and development. Has anybody seen an organization where the leadership and development person and the wellness person are the same person? Right? Does that make sense? So.
My wife works for a major corporation, and they said, "Oh, you got a little extra time. Do you want to run the wellness program?"
Oh, see, they're on it. This is a study that Harvard did at KPMG. So again, organization is how we interconnect the people within an organization. And they took a group of people at KPMG and they said, do these things. Meditate for 10 minutes every day. Write 3 things for which you're grateful. Share appreciation with each team member at the end of each meeting. Write a positive message to someone in your social network. And take 2 minutes to describe in a journal the most meaningful experience you had in the last 24 hours. Okay? So they ran this study. At the end of 3 weeks, this group scored significantly better than the control group in metrics which measured stress, engagement, general mood, and creativity. And 4 months later, they scored 4 points higher and a life satisfaction score on a 35-point scale. So these are significant changes by just doing some of those simple things. And what they found in all this was that the community part of it was really important. And that the high levels of social support predicted longevity. And what I find most interesting in here is that the amount of social support we actually provide, the more times we reach out to interconnected mind people, those people, that was the most important factor in success in an individual in an organization. Whole organization, here are some ideas that you can implement within an organization. Starting meetings with the centering and check-in. We didn't do the centering here, I do it with other groups, but I didn't want to freak you guys out. But it's really powerful. It really can change this is just closing your eyes, going through a guided meditation. It can change the dynamic in the room within a couple of minutes. A lot of companies are now, mostly in the West Coast, are using this technique. Starting with the check-in, just, hey, how are you doing today? What's going on in your life? People who come into the workplace, they bring all sorts of stuff into the workplace. We don't, when we get out of the car and we close our door, in the car door, we don't leave our life in the car. We shouldn't have to. We bring all of that energetically and emotionally and psychologically into the workplace. Yet many organizations expect us to leave all of that away. So why don't we try to bring more of that in and just understand what's going on with people. End meetings with appreciation. John Mackey, who is a big leader in the conscious capitalism movement, he runs an organization called Conscious Capitalism. He runs a couple conferences a year. It's a great group of people if you haven't heard of it. And at the end of each meeting, he goes around the room and gives each person in the room some type of appreciation for what they've done or they said in the meeting. And when he talks about it, he says he can end a meeting and feel really agitated or annoyed with somebody, but the actual act of having to say, hey, thanks for your contribution today, that saying that actually translates this emotional state into being more positive. Eliminate negative language. It's really when you listen to your own self-talk and how often you're using the can't, the won't, the shouldn't in your language, and then teaching consciousness practices. So there's some other ideas up there. So the last piece of this is the whole environment, and I see so many organizations. I said this in the beginning. One of the most important pieces of this model is these things working interchangeably. I see a lot of organizations do like some of the consciousness practices or teach some, do some coaching or do conscious communication, and then they have a wellness program, right? But then they take this system and they put it back into an unhealthy environment. We're organic living beings, yet we're expecting employees to operate within these inorganic environments in large part. So I like to liken it to fish out in the desert, right? So we're taking all of these people and expecting them to be high performers. So again, these are just some ideas and things that have been done. So just when I go into most companies, the walls are gray. And family business might be a little bit different because there's probably a little more creative expression. But in most corporate organizations, the walls are gray. So why don't we have color and art on the walls? Where do we have access to nature so we can go outside and connect with nature? Do we have somewhere we can go during the day to play music to break up our day? Many organizations now have treadmills in conference rooms, so people are actually walking while they're working, and we're moving our body. I'll know when I've done my work when we get here that where all the coffee stations are actually healthy with juice bars. So, coffee is really bad for you. So imagine in the afternoon, instead of going and having your caffeine fix, you actually went and had a green juice, like something that actually gives you some nutrition. We talked about food for a little bit, but when you look at the food that's served at meetings and the food that's served in cafeterias, in a large part it's getting better, and in a large part it's pretty unhealthy. So what can we do to start people off in the morning at a meeting with healthy food? We probably should have talked about that ahead of time.
Wow. And I think if you tell this group coffee's bad for you, I'm not sure you get an invitation back.
All right, okay. Well, that's a fact. That's not my own opinion. It doesn't mean we don't drink it, but it is not that good for you.
As long as we can balance it.
Yeah, and then eliminating, just looking at the environment, eliminating toxic paint, carpet, and cleaning agents, and looking at all the natural lighting. So I know some of these concepts are new, maybe to you, but they're not new to some of the more progressive companies. All these companies up here, plus more, I didn't have room to put them up, are doing some or all of what I just talked to you about. They're all on track with this. This is what Google does, advocates a green and conscious healthy lifestyle. The cafeteria has organic food. All of the unhealthy snacks, they still have some. It's now less proportion, so they have like 90% healthy and 10% unhealthy snacks. But all of those in their break areas, that is all behind what's it called, like frosted glass. So when you look into the cooler, you can see the healthy options, but you can't actually see the M&Ms.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's great, right?
You gotta go hunting for them.
Yeah. Places where people can gather. They have workstations with people sitting in a collaborative environment. Lava lamps. They have massage. So lots of things that are helping people to feel more whole and holistic at work. So 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 just to conclude, I see a way of working that actually works. One where we're interconnected, where we're stressing connection, where we're stressing cooperation and competition, where we're feeling and where we're actually creating organizations where people are interconnected and part of the system and then are not separate from the system. And I believe that if we do some of these things, that we can have organizations that when people go to work, they're actually coming to life.
The challenge might come from employees that say, why should the business be involved in certain things that may be other aspects of my life?
Why should the business be involved in other aspects of life?
Well, I can see that it can be because ultimately it affects the business and, the health and well-being of the employee. But, sometimes when you do things in this direction, you do get pushback from employees.
Why do you think you're getting pushback?
Because it's not their ideas.
It's not their idea.
It's a change for them.
It's a change.
Right.
It might be a change they aren't comfortable making. Trust.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a lot of programs in the past that started and stopped, and then the company sold off half the employees. So there's an issue of, if I cooperate, what are you going to do for me?
Yeah. Fear.
And are you going to do it over the long term? That's the other issue.
Okay.
I think, your comment about trust, what I keep thinking about as I was listening was actually something that Don, you said about us versus them. And it seems to me that part of what this is about in terms of the integration is where's the boundary between us versus them? It's just in an organization, in a business. So there's a comment here about, you bring people together in these leadership and extended management teams, and someone says, well, this is great, I've never been asked before for my opinion. And that, I think, isn't us versus them, that the leaders thought of themselves as this is us and the rest of the organization is them. So you wouldn't even think to engage them. I mean, I've worked for many large electric utilities, and you look at on a day-to-day basis as kind of who's us and who's them. I mean, there's union and management, there's first shift and third shift, there's operations and maintenance, there are literally dozens of us's versus them's in the environment, which is filled with a lot of fear and projection and sense of being intimidated. As I was listening, I was thinking part of what I take away from what you're saying is how do you enlarge? First of all, are we aware of where we're putting those boundaries around us versus them, and how that affects the business, and do we want to broaden that so that the us means caring? Why as a business owner do I want to even pay attention to this? What do I care about the health and safety of my employees if they're them versus part of us? And there's that idea of that the internal cooperation versus the external competition. Well, maybe there's a healthy boundary of us creating an organization that within which we're really working together against them, who's our competitors.
The tribe.
And how do you have that kind of healthy boundary within which you build the whole? So that's.
I think those are all great points. And I loved your, people saw his hand, but how do we expand out that circle so that so there's a we, that we're all included in that circle. It's not an us versus them.
Yeah, I'm working with a publishing company now, small company, where the leadership team simply can't get to an us. I mean, everyone comes to every management team meeting as the representative of their function, and they're literally dissociated, from the point of view of being a member of the team. They can't find an us.
That's where I think the interconnectivity is really important, right? We have been taught, right? And most of us grew up with the individual success, the trophy for your soccer team performance or whatever, your individual performance. But we haven't really been taught or been educated in this country about our interconnectivity. Right, so these people actually focused more on the connection between them two, their interconnectivity, how they're impacting each other, right? And that's that space in between. It gives them something different to focus on, right? Versus than just themselves. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I was reflecting on how unconscious we are of, you know, like Pete said, you'll get some pushback, like why would you be involved in the rest of our life? But I think the consciousness about how what's happening is involved in the rest of our life is so low. Like I was thinking about this guy I'm working with who called me and said, oh, I got a great night's sleep last night. I feel so much more open now to doing this stuff, right? This guy drinks coffee from the moment he enters the workplace to the, I mean, he never has an empty cup. The only thing he eats all day is pretzels. And he's modeling that behavior for his whole organization. When people take time to go into the cafeteria and eat lunch, he treats them like they're doing something wrong. And, you know, people that when they ask for their vacation time, they are chastised in a certain way.
They're losers.
Stealing from the
They're
company.
not that survival of the fittest. They're weaklings because they have to take time off.
And for some reason,
Right.
we don't actually acknowledge that that is infecting the rest of our life.
Yeah.
I mean, that how I come home as a husband and a father is going to be related to how I felt during the day at work as well.
Absolutely. Just a comment on the vacation. So everything in nature goes through cycles of rest. Everything goes through cycles of rest. Even elite athletes, when they go and train, they rest. And yet, to your point, we look at in a lot of organizations. I get this a lot from leaders that vacation is like your time to rest. Is look at you're a weakling. We've got to change that mentality because there's study after study after study that's been done that people who take the vacation are more engaged and more productive when they're back at work. So we have to get that out of the system.
And how do organizations begin to understand that $13,000 per employee that's directly hitting my bottom line, my escalating healthcare costs every year, I actually have some influence over.
Yeah. So someone said over here, why do we how do we help employees or what the employees are resisting, and in particular the healthcare costs and people's health and well-being, because companies are paying for it. You have a vested interest in this. I had a leader say to me, well, we're not going to influence, we're not going to push our health ideas on others. I said, you're paying $35 million a year in healthcare costs, and you're not going to try to help people influence people and educate people on how to eat better? That's just crazy talk. We're paying for it.
And they don't even think to do it as an offering.
Right.
They think we're going to force it. But my wife just put out a little flyer for Weight Watchers at the office, and a whole group is gathered, and they've lost 175 pounds in like 6 months.
Yeah, but I'm going to be extreme for a second. I'm not saying, I'm just going to be extreme, okay, to demonstrate a point. Again, if we believe that food and nutrition and exercise help people be more effective, more productive, better with customers, better problem solvers, more empathetic to people that are working for them, and we know that all this stuff now, exercising and eating right, actually help to lower people's healthcare costs. Why wouldn't we expect people to do that in our organization? Why would we, when we're interviewing, I'm being extreme, right? Why when we're interviewing, are we not asking about their health lifestyle and hiring people who have a healthy lifestyle? If we know all of this information, we have this data now, right? Okay, I know it's a little out there, but think about it. Don't you want the healthiest, most vibrant, productive employees in your organization?
So you say you started the hiring process then?
I do. I'm being extreme, but I do. And we can't really do that. The laws in the U.S. You can't ask somebody what they have for breakfast. But I do. I think if we hired healthier people,
You
right,
can't
just
ask
the
people
input.
about
You can't ask them though, what are your outside activities?
You say you can?
Yeah.
You can't ask
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, you can.
And, if
Why not?
they don't mention anything at all that's a physical activity,
Right. For a couch potato, why would I want them here, right?
Right.
It's just an idea. Okay, what about the concept of the environment? Most of the focus is either in the human, the left-hand side development, and maybe sometimes the communication or interpersonal skills, but have you seen any organizations that are actually looking at, you take this system and put it in the environment that we're putting it into and focusing on that at all?
The one that I mentioned that has the highest
Yeah.
employee engagement studies, they intentionally created their corporate headquarters with some of this stuff in mind. One of the things they did is they put the reservations department at the center of the organization. Like, these are the people that are on the phone
Oh,
talking
neat.
to their customers. It's actually everything is built around
That's
it.
great, that's the hub.
Right,
It's like
it's
a
the
little
hub.
spokes off of it.
And the cafeteria comes right off of that.
Mhm.
And the
The
cafeteria
social.
is in an environment that is very inviting. It's like you want to spend time there. So those are just two small examples. That
Is it
come to
pretty
mind.
when you walk in? Is
It's
it
beautiful. Yeah,
aesthetically
you
pretty?
You walk
Does
through
light-
this, like the main hallway that you walk through has like beautiful paintings and like a little fake bridge, like you're going over.
Water?
Yeah.
Do you hear water?
I don't know if you
Okay.
hear water. That's something I'll
Okay.
check. It's like,
Uh-huh.
it looks like you're going over water, but I
That's
don't
neat.
know. Anyway, they were intentional,
Uh-huh.
at least, about trying. Yeah, I don't think they had any research that they were, I think that, but it's interesting that that's the one that stands out in my mind, and that's the one that has this very high
Yeah. Where are they,
engagement.
what part of the country?
Oh, they're in Connecticut.
In Connecticut, great. That's great.
An extreme case, a company that sells organic meats, and the owner established, one of the things he did, he showed me, was a room with just pillows where people could go in and there's music playing and they
Great.
could just get away from the office, I guess. An open forum, everybody was out in the open.
Uh-huh.
They huddled, they had tall tables so that they could get together on a daily basis, perhaps more than once, and they'd stand and talk about the business together.
Standing
So
up.
they're standing up and in a very short period of time, collaborate in terms of what's going on. But there were different elements like that brought people together in environments.
Right, so here are two examples of some of these things that are happening in organizations that people here are working in.
And I mean, the one that I'm talking about, it's definitely helping them compete.
Great. Why is that? Do you think people are just feeling better, they're happier, they're healthier?
They do a lot of work on their culture, and the engagement of their employees is one of their highest leadership values. Like, they work on it. But I know more about the family than I do about
The environment.
The
Okay.
family's a little bit more needy in terms of their.
Okay.
This is a very, it's a challenge for some companies, and I think to sell this, it's an education, and I think it's very much a long-term proposition, and you have to put things in place that will, over the long term, could be part of the strategic plan as to how do you change the culture, how do you change the way you actually, what are you going to do to cause all of these things to happen in the mindset of not only the owners, but all the way down in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have buy-in from the top, but there's sort of a couple different camps, right? So there are leaders that actually, for whatever reason, life experience, what they're born into this world, they get it. They really get it. I've met lots of them. You look a lot of those companies that I showed before.
So you don't
they're
need to convert them.
Sorry.
You don't need
That's
to
my point.
convert them.
But there are people, and then there are the groups of people that need more of the data, or need to see that it's worked in other places, or need to see it in pieces. But I won't go in and work with an organization unless they get that all those things need to work together. Because I don't believe that you can make a big impact on a company by doing one small piece of any of this. You have to do it all together, and it is a commitment, right? Yeah. But there are companies that are doing it now, which is exciting. When I started thinking about this 10 years ago, it was like, huh? But now I find all sorts of people who are doing this or get it, which is sort of fun.
Do you see that certain companies are more receptive to it because of you mentioned Google, and they're always looking for the
Latest and greatest, right?
The latest and greatest, so that it's more a creative environment, or it's more, it's intellectual capital seems to be, because a lot of the companies that we work with are, they're B2B and they're kind of manufacturing, and these guys are dealing with very tight
Budgets.
budgets, and so to do the jump, that I'll spend time on what they're gonna think is squishy. I can't equate that to the bottom line. So, versus if I have a business that's dependent on new product. I can say that if I can keep those couple of really smart brains in my building, I realize that. I can visualize. So I was just wondering if you're seeing it.
Well, I mean, certainly, in manufacturing or in industries where there's a tighter margin, I mean, there definitely are industries where there's harder to make a margin because of the product or the industry, right, or where the industry is in its life cycle. Sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? They're in this like basic human needs survival thing. They're not ready to self-actualize.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we're talking about here is a little bit of self-actualization. I actually believe that if you do some of that self-actualization, it will create better profits, but I understand that some people who don't sort of naturally get this, it's going to be hard for them to understand.
Yeah.
And that companies that have higher profit margins, either hedge fund companies or biotech or some of the more innovative technology companies, they have more money to spend, so they can take chances on some of this and be more creative. So I agree with that. But the company that one of the companies is doing a lot with this is Eileen Fisher,
Okay.
and she's clothing, which is not typically a huge high margin organization, but she's really doing a lot of what I'm talking about here. She's really a leader in this.
The ROI on this is long. I mean, when you start influencing people,
Couple of years.
changing cultures,
It's a couple of years.
I'd even say more than a couple of years.
If you look at the ROI on wellness, and it's over $6 to $1 invested. Yeah. So it's high.
And that's just wellness.
Well, just wellness. Yeah.
So speaking of one of those that's kind of close to this idea, I mean, I'm working with a company right now that has like an 800% turnover in the last 3 years.
100%.
It's hard. I mean, people can't stand working there. And I'm wondering, to take away, I mean, what are there 3 ideas I can bring there that, I have influence. I could convince them to try something. When you said I won't work in a place unless they're willing to do all this, I'm like,
I mean, over time.
right. So
Right, unless I bought into the whole
like,
concept.
What is the point of the spear? What could we say, like?
So I would need to talk with you more and understand the culture more before I, out of all of that's only a portion of what we could do to give you the 3 things that you could do. We could talk about that later.
All right.
So I could pick the right ones, like the Chinese menu, making sure I get the right ones.
Do you start in the environment? Is that where you start? Do you start in organization, or it depends on the company?
I think it depends on the company. I actually think that I probably would start with helping individuals understand their own connectivity and their own interconnection. Because that's where it starts. If we can get those concepts ingrained in people, that you have a system within you that's actually connected, that your body impacts your mind impacts your body, everything is operating interconnectedly. And then that we're not a separate entity from each other, that we're actually connected in some way, and what I do impacts you. So all of that, the energetics around it, I think when people start to change their world, not their world, but their view about their paradigm, right? They then can show up in a different way, and then they start to demand the change. They're not going to want to work in an environment. When you get somebody who starts getting turned on to this and gets this, they start to not want to be in that environment, or they self-select out. Or they start to demand change in that environment.
We hear the term a lot.
Or they start to make the change.
We hear the term, which is a negative term, silos. And working in silos. I think you mentioned that too. I mean, people just tend to do that. So how do you take that into this other area?
Yeah, I mean,
That's
the challenge.
So
I'm sort of talking about the concepts and solutions. When you're looking at silos and organizations, you have to look at the why. Really why, and there's all sorts of human behavior concepts and theory, right, that come into that. But why are people creating silos? What are they trying to protect? Why do they need to feel separate? What is it feeding in them? And what emotion is that coming from? Is it a fear-based emotion? Is it scarcity? Right? A lot of people in our world operate from the model of scarcity. And if we can simply get people to operate from a model of abundance, right, there's enough. there's enough for everybody. If we can get people to shift from that, imagine how different how they would operate, right?
I have a belief over the years that the family model was the strongest influence over the current model of businesses, where there's, especially from a power standpoint, I can't believe that and this is really exacerbated in family businesses, where I see the parents as treating their kids, no matter what the age difference is, as adolescents. And sometimes I get hired in to work on adolescence, when in fact the parent wants to remain the parent, not the father, the mother, or whatever. And it's amazing how you get trained in that family model because you've been brought up in it.
Right.
I think in the book, I'm Okay, You're Okay, I think it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right? The whole parent-child aspect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is, again, someone made the point that this is simplified. I mean, of course, it's simplified. This is a 17-week course, right? And this is just a 1 hour presentation. One of the things I love about human dynamics is a lot of people here that are involved with human behavior dynamics is because it is complicated. It is never ending. It's not. These are not simple problems to solve, and we're dealing with history and evolution and belief systems and culture and mindsets, and I mean, there's so many different things that go on that create these systems. So it's not just a simple solution. It's trying a lot of different things, right? But what I do know is that what we've been doing isn't working, and that we need to get out of our current paradigm and into a new paradigm about how we see organizations. So thanks for the opportunity to be here today, and I hope it gave you might not agree with everything I said. I hope it gave you some things to think about, and just a different way of looking at some things.
Thank you.
Thanks.